2013 would fall well below this benchmark, shown by the yellow line, and then 2014 again would be approaching it. Next, let's consider the quarterly path of payroll employment. This first part is the history part, and I just want to point out to you this big spike here. Here's the first quarter of 2011. That's total employment. That's when manufacturing employment grew by 13.6%. So that contributed to a 4.7% growth in total employment overall, and that is what we call in the economics business torrid. That's the most noteworthy thing there. And then we extend the line into the forecast period, and you can see that we see a sustained but moderately paced recovery in Michigan over the next 3 years. That's consistent with a U.S. economy that carries on, but at a subpar pace, and domestic nameplate vehicle sales that move up, but slowly. And if you look at the bottom line in this box at the bottom, that shows you how the growth path translates into job gains from the end of 1 year to the end of the next year. So we have gains of 26,000 jobs from the end of 11 to the end of 12, and then it accelerates up to 56,300 from the end of 13 to the end of 14. These numbers are a little different than what I just showed you because the previous ones were calendar year averages, and these are year end to year end. Okay. So our outlook for job growth this year and the next two, following a decade of systematic decline. But how much ground are we making up in the recovery through 2014 relative to what we lost in the preceding dark years? Here the news is more sobering, as you can see on this next slide. You'll see the dramatic decline in jobs from the state's peak employment quarter in the spring of 2000 to its trough in the summer of 2009. I think that really stands out. This represents a loss of 857,000 jobs. 857,000 jobs lost. Then the recovery kicks in. From its low point in the summer of 2009 to the summer of 2011, Michigan gained 101,000 jobs. From then to the end of 2014, we're forecasting the state will create an additional 114,000 jobs. So from 9Q3 to 11Q3, 101,000 jobs. From 11Q3 to 14Q4, Q means quarter, 114,000 jobs. If you add those together, this recovery to this point represents an increase of 215,000 jobs compared with the 857,000 lost. So where would we be compared with past history at the end of 2014? Well, we'd be a little below where we were at the end of 2008. Thus, we'd make up most of the loss from the unprecedented crash of 2009. Obviously, we have much farther to go to make up the losses prior to 2009. Okay. How do the unemployed come into play? We see the rate drifting down over the next 3 years from our calendar year estimate of 10.5% for 2011 to 9.4% this year and reaching 8.7% by 2014. So I think you would agree that despite the expected improvement in the jobless rate, these remain stubbornly high rates. Indeed, the rates for the past few years would have been higher still had not the state's labor force declined consistently in recent times. We've had a lot of labor force withdrawal. So for perspective, what we decided to do is let's hold the labor force constant at its average level for 2010 and counteract the decline that actually occurred in 2011 and see what the unemployment rate would have been had we not let this retreat of the labor force occur. So with the labor force held constant and the same employment scenario that I talked to you about, the unemployment rate for 2011 would have come in at 12%, which is down here, instead of the 10.5% that we are now estimating as the official number. Okay, so, and it turns out, if you do the arithmetic, the jobless rate fell by 2 percentage points. 1.5 of those percentage points was because of labor force withdrawal, and 0.5 percentage point was due to the job gains. Okay, now these statistics only refer to those people who are actively seeking employment. You have to say you're actively seeking employment and be registered to count in these unemployment statistics. So, I was asked at the revenue conference, if you include all of the other people, the discouraged workers, the people that are working part-time when they want to work full-time, what would the rate be? And I didn't have that number, but I have now found it. So, if you take discouraged workers, other marginally attached workers, and involuntary part-time workers, and include all of them as well, the rate for fiscal year 2011, it's the only number I got, for fiscal year 2011 was 19.2%. It's what's called the U6 measure. And that would be compared to an official rate of 10.7% over fiscal year 2011, which isn't up here. So that gives you some idea of what else is out there. Okay. Now, going back to the official numbers and looking at the, again, putting those unemployment rates in context, this next slide, I think, reinforces the observation that the improving unemployment rates that we're forecasting still remain historically high. The rate in 2014, 8.7%, is almost a percentage point above the 7.9% rate we averaged from 1970 to 2008. Okay. Let's do a few other things before I turn it over to you guys. Let's talk about local inflation. And this is measured by the Detroit CPI, the Detroit Consumer Price Index. You can see from this graph that we think local inflation is going to be fairly tame over the next 3 years, in the neighborhood of 2% per year in each of 2012 to 2014. But actually, I like inflation. It enables you to live in a more expensive neighborhood without having to move. Personal income. Income growth slows to 2.3% in 2012, and that's consistent with the softer labor market I've been telling you about, and also slower growth in non-wage income. And you see the growth rate essentially holds in 2013, and then it spurts back to near 5% in 2014, and that's with this expected improvement in the labor market I've been telling you about. And finally, we have real disposable income, what some people call purchasing power. Real disposable income growth is simply personal income growth, which you see here, adjusted for inflation and also adjusted for taxes. And you can see that it slows to almost zero in 2012 as we have slower nominal income growth, and the scheduled increase in Michigan income taxes are only partially offset by lower inflation and a smaller increase in federal personal taxes. Then you can see that the growth in real disposable income holds in 2013. That's consistent with a similar situation for nominal income and a similar situation for inflation. And then it moves up to 1.6% in 2014, and that just mimics the increase in the nominal income. Okay, I'm going to go here. When we combine our outlook for the economy with the institutional architecture of state revenues, including the recent tax reforms, we arrive at our forecast of state revenues for this fiscal year and the following two. I must tell you, I've been in this business for a while, and just going through